Ah, that was a long journey. Oh, hello there. What is the date today? Let's check on my phone. That's funny. The 26th of March. That date is very familiar to me. 10 years ago today, I officially became a Doctor Who fan. How weird is that? I was a 10-year-old. I sat down on the sofa for the first time, and on 7 o'clock on that evening, the 26th of March, I sat down and I watched what would be my favourite ever show, Doctor Who. And you can see behind me, I've got all this merchandise through the years, all these action figures. I've got the DVDs right here. You can't see them on camera, but you've seen them in other videos. And 10 years ago today is where it all started with the episode Rose. That is how I met the Doctor. Christopher Eccleston was my first ever Doctor. Rose was the first ever companion I ever saw, and the title of the episode, Rose, was the first ever story that I ever saw as well. So, really, 10 years ago today, I've more or less been a Doctor Who fan for half of my life now, because I was 10 years old, now 20, and ever since, I've never stopped loving it, really. I got into the show, watched Eccleston, I thought he was brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, absolutely fantastic Doctor. I wasn't intending to say that, but no pun intended. I then had Tennant, and it was around... Well, after Tennant started, I started collecting the merchandise. I started collecting the action figures behind me on my shelves, and I then started getting into the classic series by collecting the figures. I saw a couple of classic episodes on, I think back then it was called UK Drama. I think now it's called Alibi. If you've got Freeview or Sky or whatever, I've got Sky, so if you've got that, you'll understand. And then it's just ever since, really, my love for Doctor Who has kept on growing. I got into the classic series. I started collecting the classic DVDs in late 2011, and of course, as seen a few weeks ago, I celebrated 3 years on YouTube with my first video in 2012. So really, my love for the show keeps on growing, and it will keep on going on and on and on. But we're here to review a story today, and it is, of course, the first ever episode of the revived era, Rose. Now, what do I think of this story? Well, like I said, it blew me away when I first watched it. I thought, wow, I want to watch this every week. It was just fantastic. I just felt so captivated by the idea of this alien travelling in a police box. You know, it was a great reintroduction for the show. You know, it brought a new generation of fans to the show, don't forget. You know, the whole idea was to show a new generation what Doctor Who was all about, because a lot of people, including me, had never seen it before. I'll admit, I never heard anything about Doctor Who before that episode came out 10 years ago. Honest to God. I may have seen on the billboards, I don't know, some of you may remember, some of you are old enough to remember, may remember the billboards. You could see them on the roads. I remember I saw a billboard and the billboard's still there now, and it advertised that picture, and it had the Doctor and Rose, and it just advertised Doctor Who, and it was like a movie sort of thing. And I remember seeing it around that week. I can't really remember, but I remember seeing it before I saw the episode. I remember thinking, that looks good, and of course, it was good. It was absolutely fantastic, and not a day goes by I don't regret ever tuning in to the show, because I've said in the past, I'll say it again, I feel Doctor Who as a TV show phenomenon. It's kind of made me who I am today, because I often quote characters all the time, and at university I think I'm probably like the biggest Doctor Who fan in class. There might be a couple of other big whovians, but still, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and I'm sure you've probably realised that by now. If you haven't, where have you been? I've been doing videos for over 3 years, but anyhow, going off track. Rose. So, like I said, it's introduced a whole new generation of fans, and it reintroduced long-time fans of the show back to the show as well, because some people, like my dad, he remembers watching the classic series. It was on and off. He wasn't like a die-hard fan like me, who watches every week, tunes in every week. He watched it now and again, and from what he said, he saw the very first episode starring William Hartnell back in 1963, and he watched it throughout the 60s. I think he watched it through the 70s as well. He said that Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee and Tom Baker, all of those were great doctors, and he said Tom Baker, from what he remembered, was an astounding doctor. But then he said, when it came to the Peter Davison era, he said that's when the show started going downhill. And I can see where he's coming from here, because Doctor Who suffered greatly during the 1980s, and I think the problem was, because it was axed in 1989, Doctor Who was, by some of its critics, was remembered of being, it's that show with the shaky wobbly sets, it's that shit show. It got cancelled in the 1980s. It started out in the 60s, it had its run, it's dead now, and they brought it back in 1996. That failed epically. Russell T Davies, he managed to bring the show back. He fought effortlessly to get the show back. He kept contacting the BBC, look, I want to bring Doctor Who back, because like long-time fans of the classic series, I mean, like I said earlier, I didn't know what Doctor Who was before then. I wish, if I had my time over again, I wish I knew of Doctor Who before I started watching it with Rose. But nevertheless, I still like all of Doctor Who now. I really love the classic series as well as the new series. So, it's just unfortunate that I sort of grew up in the wilderness years, and Russell T Davies, he grew up with the classic series. He wanted to bring that back, and you can really see that in this story, because you've got all those nods to the classic series, and you get that throughout. Maybe not so much in the first series of the revival, because I think the first series of the revival, I mean, at the time I didn't know. To me, Eccleston was the first Doctor. I had no idea that there had been Doctors before him. I thought he was the first one. I thought it was a brand new show. I had no idea that such a show already existed. I thought it was just a completely brand new show made for the BBC, but it wasn't. It was a revival of the show. But like I say, the episode, it's more about the eyes of the companion, and I think what Russell T Davies does very well in this story, what he did really well was, the whole introduction of the TARDIS, the Doctor, the Companion, and you've got your monsters. It's not just a blatant rip-off of An Unearthly Child, because, well, The Unearthly Child, the Doctor is sort of like he's more mysterious than that, but in this he's mysterious, but he's not the cranky old man who kidnaps the Companion. In this, he just takes the Companion, and he talks about the Time War and all of that. He's got a backstory. Back in The Unearthly Child, there was no backstory. All it was my grandfather, he's called the Doctor, and that was it. And so, in Rose, what Davies did was introduce viewers like myself to all of these characters. He introduced the monsters, but he didn't do it in a way where it was like a carbon copy of what had been done before in the classic series, which is good because it's it's still fresh. It's not just a complete rip-off. And I think he did it very well, because obviously I tuned in the next week for the second episode, The End of the World. But what do I think about the story itself? Well, obviously I've watched it loads of times since, because I got it on DVD. And it's not the best episode in the world. It's a good story. It's a good story to revive the show. It's a lot better than Doctor Who the movie, which was also an attempted sort of revive, a way to revive the show. It didn't really work, because in the movie it starts off with Sylvester McCoy. You've got a voiceover of Paul McGann. If that was your first episode of Doctor Who, you were probably thinking, what the hell is going on here? Whereas this, it's very clear what is going on. It starts off with Rose. Her alarm clock goes off. Her life, it seems, is pretty average. She's got a boyfriend, Mickey Smith. She works at a department store. And she wears teenage clothes, because the character is supposed to be 19 years old, I believe. I think she was 19. Yeah, 19. And, she's just a common 21st century girl. Because one of the things Russ T Davies also wanted to do, he didn't want to immediately set it on an alien planet or in the Roman times. He didn't want that to happen. He purposely set the first story in present day Earth, and it worked. The reason it worked, familiarity with the audience. The audience could relate to this place. Set in London, everyone could relate to where this place was, etc. It was just normal. And then, when Rose is going through inside the department store doing her job, we get a voiceover of Graham Norton. I can't even remember that happening, to be honest. But for those of you who don't know, I'll briefly explain. The bit when Rose, on the original broadcast, the bit when Rose was walking through the department store and she encounters the Autons for the first time, you hear a voiceover of Graham Norton. So you thought that the ending of The Time of Angels was bad. Well, that you could actually hear his voice. You can find it on YouTube. You probably see it somewhere. Just type in Doctor Who, Rose, Graham Norton or something like that, because I think he had a programme that came on think it was before or after it. I can't remember. I never watched it because I thought it was shit. But there you go. I watched on that night for Doctor Who because I thought this looks awesome, and it was absolutely awesome. And it was just, it's odd because it was like right at the first sort of moment in the new series where something unusual happens, and then you get this Irishman talking over. Bit odd. A bit of an odd coincidence there. Whether he dislikes Doctor Who, I don't know, but who cares anyway? Taking up the review. They start moving, and then when I watched it for the first time, I thought, Jesus Christ, this is good stuff. I wasn't scared by it. I don't think I've ever been remotely scared of an episode. I don't think I have. Maybe The Empty Child, but we'll come to that when I review that. And then you get this man who reassures the audience that everything's going to be alright. You see his hands, and the first words he says are "run." The Doctor is in. And I must say, Eccleston delivers an absolutely brilliant performance. He's mysterious, he's got his leather jacket on, he kept his northern accent, which is fine. I think it emphasises his performance more. And I think his chemistry with Billy Piper, I thought it was really good, and I thought they worked very well as a TARDIS team. It's just a shame that Eccleston only did the one series, but who knows? Maybe it was just meant to be. I think because maybe series 2, it would have been. I think the show now, as it is now, as we see it now, it'd be a whole lot different because Eccleston is remembered for the Doctor who only did one series. So got that. Rose is thinking, what the hell's going on? She flees a building. Building explodes. Then she thinks, oh my god, I've lost a job. The next day, the Doctor finds her home, and it turned out that an Auton arm was there, and then the Auton arm attacks him. And you get the sense that he's just regenerated because he says the line, he comments on his ears, and it's just a really good scene. There's a lot of great things about this episode. I think if there's one thing I have to say that's a bit bad, it's the runtime. I thought for the first episode of the Revive series, looking back now, maybe it could have been a bit longer, like an hour long, maybe 90 minutes or 75 minutes. Just make it a bit longer, because I just thought for an introduction to the new series, an reintroduction for Doctor Who, I thought maybe do it again, make it longer, just like the old series, because you count up all the episodes, like you had your 4-parters and your 6-parters, they all added up to 90 minutes or sometimes 2 hours. So I think they kind of missed a trick there. With it being the first episode, it should have made it at least an hour long, I felt. And I think because of that, the 45-minute length, there's a bit of running about, and in parts I feel it's a little bit rushed. Not too rushed, because there is plenty of character development. I say a lot more character development than what we've had in recent times under Stephen Moffat. But I think the character development of Rose, she comes across this moany teenage girl who is just bored with life in general. She's got a crappy job. She's lost her job again because it's been implied that she's had many jobs and she's jacked them all in. She's got Mickey Smith, who, you know, he's a wimp, basically. As you see towards the end of the episode, he's a complete wimp. And then the Doctor comes along and he completely changes everyone's lives. And it's not just, you know, going back to before, it's not just the whole, oh, it's just Doctor Who over again, but it's just made for the 21st century. You know, it really is 21st century stuff. At times you think this is a bit like a soap opera, because you get a lot of scenes between Rose Tyler and her mother, and then you get a few scenes with Rose Tyler and Mickey. Really, the Doctor, if you've had up all the screen time, he's not really in it that much, and he's more mysterious in this story, because I think that's why this story is just called Rose, because, you know, you've got Rose Tyler. She is more or less the main character of this story, not the Doctor. It's what you see through Rose's eyes, what the audience sees. And, you know, all those moments, like when she goes into the TARDIS for the first time, when she encounters the Autons for the first time, you know, the audience would probably react in the same way. I reacted in the same way because, like I said before, I had no idea about Doctor Who or what a TARDIS was. It was a police box, you know. No idea at all. Absolutely. I have absolutely no recollection of Doctor Who before I watched that episode, ever. The only recollection, really, is just seeing that advertisement on the billboard, but, you know, I've never actually seen anything. I've never heard the theme tune before. I was absolutely blown away. It's my favourite theme tune of all time as well. You know, everything about Doctor Who I love, but, you know, I keep going on. You know, this review, really, it's been a nostalgic sort of review. Whether you call it review, because really I've just been talking about the reintroduction of Doctor Who. But I feel that Rose is a good way to start with Doctor Who. It's not perfect by any means, but Unearth the Child, that's not perfect either. You know, it's just a good, solid 45-minute episode. It shows you the basics of what Doctor Who is all about to a viewer. You know, it's a good way to introduce the show to a viewer. Even now, if you had a kid, never seen Doctor Who before, first episode they see would be Rose. You know, it'd be a good way to show them what the show's all about. It'd be a great way to introduce them to the show, I feel. So, I would recommend, you know, if you've never seen Rose before, you probably have. I don't see why you wouldn't have, because I'm sure many of you subscribers, your first episode might have been Rose just like me. That's how I became a Doctor Who fan. That's why you might have become a Doctor Who fan. Who knows? But the thing I'm trying to say is, even now, Rose can get away with being a story that can introduce any viewer at any age. You know, you could be an old man, you know? I think Rose is a great example, a great way to start watching Doctor Who. So, what do I think of everything else? Well, you've got Mark Benton. He sort of mentions about the Doctor. He's had all these past lives, so he kind of references the regeneration. You know, at the time I didn't know anything about that. Obviously I watched it since and I picked up on it. I thought, oh yeah, never noticed that before. And yeah, Mark Benton, he played Clive. Yeah, I think it was Clive or Clyde. Clive. And he gets killed by an Auton. Yeah, he's just a everyday man I think Clive, he sort of represents the long-time viewer. So, you know, viewers who remember Doctor Who watched that for the first time, when you get introduced to Clive, people will be like, oh yeah, because I think he just references what the Doctor's all about. He's appeared in all the events, like the sinking of the Titanic or the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which happened the day before the show started. I think that was kind of a nod to An Unearthly Child, that by Russell T Davies, but it paid off. But obviously, the biggest continuity reference in this story is the reintroduction of the Autons. Now, what they could have done, they could have just used a completely new villain to start the whole series off. But Davies decided to revive Doctor Who with the first episode featuring an old classic villain. And it wasn't the Daleks, it was the Autons. Bearing in mind, the Autons only appeared twice in the classic series, once in Spearhead from Space, and the other being Terror of the Autons. And I feel that there's a lot of references to Spearhead from Space. You even have the sound effects of when the Autons attack all the human beings. They're smashing through the windows. The only difference is they look more modern. You know, more 21st century. Because in Spearhead from Space, they look more like 1960s, 1970s mannequins with all the clothing and all of that. So I think it was a great idea that Davies decided to bring back an old villain for the start of the show, because it also shows that it's the same show as before, but not the exact same. You know, it's been brought back into the 21st century. It's got a new look, got a new Doctor, new take on everything, but it's still the same show. And Doctor Who's done it loads of times. It's changed actors playing the Doctor. It's changed companions. It's changed theme tunes. It's changed TARDIS interiors and all of that. You know, it's changed writers, executive producers, etc. But it is still the same show. It's still called Doctor Who. So I quite like how he brought the Autons in there. It's a nice sort of round off of the classic series as well. Even though, well, even me, I didn't even know what the hell an Auton was. I didn't even know that they were a returning villain. Well, I don't even know when I found that out. Must have been a couple of years later when I started getting to the classic series, and I realised, oh, that they were in Rose, the first episode I watched. And it's funny because I think Davies, he wanted to model the whole Earth thing, the Earthbound thing, what you got in the John Pertwee era, because a lot of John Pertwee stories were set on Earth, because the whole familiarity thing again. And I think he really likes that idea, so he thought he'd bring that in, but with a modern take, and I think it really paid off well. You've got the Nestine consciousness. It's CGI. Has it aged that well? Maybe not. I don't know. It looks decent, I guess. Not terrible CGI. There's been worse CGI, even in more recent stories there's been worse CGI than that, I believe. What else? I like the music by Murray Gold. My God, the music by Murray Gold, outstanding. Absolutely brilliant music by Murray Gold. Both theme music and incidental music. I feel that his music back in the earlier series of the revived era was much better than the music we get nowadays. I mean, you take the Matt Smith era, a lot of the music was just the same old I Am the Doctor theme tune. Don't get me wrong, I like that tune. I think it's epic. It's a good tune for the 11th Doctor, but it got used to absolute death. I feel in the first series there's more originality about it, and the second series, and the third series, and the fourth series, and the fifth series as well. The fifth series has got good music, even though I'm not keen on the fifth series. But I think with the sixth series, the music went downhill. The seventh series picked up a little bit, still wasn't that great. Series 8 was average in terms of music, I feel. So hopefully Series 9 will be better, but there you go. But I feel the music in this was absolutely great. You know, it also shows that, you know, bring more incidental music into the series, because some may feel that the classic series might have lacked in music like that. So I think it's a nice touch, you know, a nice addition to what we've got in this new revived show. What else is there to say? There's a lot of things to say, because this is a big episode. You know, it was the first ever episode of New Who. You know, first episode I ever saw. I've got a lot of nostalgia from this episode. But just get the DVD out. You know, this is the first ever DVD I got. Doctor Who as well. Don't know if you can see that. But there you go. You know, I'd never even heard of a TARDIS or a Dalek or a Cyberman or the Doctor. I had no idea what the hell it was. But when I watched Rose for the first time, it was mind-blowing. I'll give you the synopsis, see if it does a better job than what I have. When Rose Tyler meets a mysterious stranger called the Doctor, her life will never be the same again. Soon she realises that her mum, her boyfriend, and the whole of planet Earth are in danger. The only hope for salvation lies inside a strange blue box. And that's true. The Doctor saved the day at the end of the episode. He destroyed the Nestine consciousness. And then, at the very end, Rose Tyler becomes the Doctor's companion. Officially. And then you get the theme tune kicking in, and that's the end of the episode. I think it's an absolutely marvellous way to introduce the show to new viewers. Would I say that it is a masterpiece? No. There are better episodes, as you shall see. There's been many better episodes, but I feel this laid the foundations, and it got, I think, over 10 million viewers straight away, recommissioned for a second series. That's how successful it was. So this episode was key to Doctor Who continuing, and it's still on today. 10 years. I'm trying to think of a score. K9, what would you say the score is for this episode?
The score for this episode will be a 7 out of 10.
And there we have it. So, I'm going to round off this review now by saying that this story was a good way to introduce, you know, I've said it over and over and over again, but Rose was a great way to introduce me to Doctor Who. I'm just saying this through personal experience, and it's introduced me to all of this around me. You know, take a look around you. Got all of these DVDs, got all of the action figures, I've got books, box sets. I'm even going to start collecting the big finished CD soon. So eventually when I get around to them, I'll be reviewing those for you. So Rose started off my whole life as a Doctor Who fan. 10 years ago today, I became a Doctor Who fan, and I happily say that I will always be a Doctor Who fan for the rest of my life. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching this review, this special review, 10th anniversary review of Rose. Next time I shall be reviewing The End of the World, and that shall come out next Thursday. So when that comes out, it'll be the 10th anniversary of that story. So what I plan to do is release a review every week, which marks the 10th anniversary of that particular story. So if you enjoyed this, why don't you leave a like? You can comment, tell me what you thought of Rose. You can even comment about your memories of this episode if, like me, you started watching Doctor Who because of this episode. And if you want to see more reviews, if you want to carry on watching more of these reviews, I know this review's been long, but it's been a special review. You can subscribe, as I shall be reviewing the rest of Series 1 over the coming few weeks. And yeah, that's all I've got to say really. So have a great day, and until next time, cheerio.